Tales of Herding Gods, Chapter 449, Chapter Translator Ninetales, Editor Dark Gem. The dragon Qilin, however, was overjoyed beyond measure. With Qinmu seated upon his back, the great fatty burst forward with renewed vigour. His hooves thundered across the earth as he ran with tireless determination, moving with the flash and fury of lightning itself, far swifter than he had ever been when trudging through the desert sands. Even though his thoughts sometimes wandered into distant realms, he was not someone like Gei Kei. When he heard Qinmu say that Patriarch had not fallen to Patriarch's son, but had instead ascended to become a god, the large and rotund beast could not suppress his excitement. The news filled him with delight, and he secretly resolved to work twice as hard from now on. Qinmu found it difficult to lie to him. In the sea of fog within the living realm of the dead, Taoist Ling Jing served as the ferryman guiding souls across the mist, Qinmu thought silently to himself. If that is so, then Patriarch should also be within the living realm of the dead. Village chief gave me 8 Fengdu coins, so I must return there once more and seek the answer with my own eyes. He withdrew the geographical map that Gei Kei had once gifted him and unfurled it before his eyes. Carefully studying the markings, he searched the terrain around them. After a moment, he located the positions of True Heaven Palace and Fragrant Bloom City upon the parchment. Lifting his head, he examined the surrounding landscape to determine where they currently stood. Immediately, he commanded the dragon Qilin to sprint toward the southwest. Before them, an enormous mountain stretched across the horizon, blocking the path of the land like a colossal wall of stone. Yet the mountain's appearance was strangely unnatural. It resembled a towering giant standing upright, with 2 immense mountain peaks hanging downward from its shoulders. Even stranger was the shape of those 2 peaks. When they descended toward the ground, their forms grew thick and rounded, becoming wide and circular, like 2 enormous bells suspended just above the earth. As Qinmu rode toward the strange formation, he quickly realized he had 2 choices. He could guide the dragon Qilin straight between the 2 hanging bells, cutting directly through the pass, or he could circle around the strange mountain body and take a detour. Just as the dragon Qilin rushed forward, Qinmu lifted his head and saw an elegant woman clad in black robes slowly drifting upward along the mountain. She floated lightly and then landed upon the summit. Near her was a golden sheet of paper that resembled a sealing talisman. Qinmu's pupils contracted sharply. He saw the woman reaching out and tearing the golden paper away from the mountain. "Not good, fatty dragon, rush through!" The instant those words left his mouth, the gigantic mountain trembled violently. A deep rumbling echoed across the land as the mountain suddenly lifted its feet. The incomparably massive body uprooted itself from the earth. Qinmu's heart sank as he realized the situation had turned dire. Instantly, the carefree sword leapt from the sheath behind him. With a shrill whistle, the sword streaked through the air and shot directly toward the woman standing upon the mountain peak. To capture bandits, one must first seize their leader. The mountain giant could not possibly move on its own. Such a transformation certainly required the magical power of a powerful practitioner to sustain it. If the woman was killed, Qinmu believed he could interrupt the awakening of the giant. The woman turned her head to glance at him, a cold sneer curling across her lips. "Since you dared to kill a disciple of my Yu family," she said icily, "then even if you were the Emperor's own father, who would care? I will send you to follow her." At that moment, the mountain giant tore one leg free from the soil and slammed it down upon the earth. Mud burst outward in all directions like a violent storm. Then it pulled out its second leg and slowly rose upright. When the towering mountain giant stood to its full height, clouds swirled around its waist. The 2 bell-shaped peaks were lifted high into the sky. Massive rocks tumbled down from the secondary peaks, crashing from the heavens and piling up along the road below. The woman remained standing proudly atop the giant's head. Meanwhile, Carefree Sword spun violently and transformed into the drill sword form as it shot into the clouds. The woman from the Yu family immediately sensed the danger of her situation. Without hesitation, she cried out sharply, and several flying hoops burst from her sleeves. The rings whistled through the air and rushed downward, seeking to bind the Carefree Sword that was racing toward her. Ding, 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 ding. The sound of metal clashing erupted like rain striking iron. The flying hoops wrapped around Carefree Sword and rapidly shrank, attempting to trap the spinning blade. Yet in the next moment they were torn apart. The spinning divine sword shredded the hoops into fragments. Although the woman's cultivation was not weak, the techniques of West Earth did not focus on strengthening one's own body. Instead, their practitioners borrowed the power of heaven and earth to battle. As a result, their personal combat strength was far inferior to that of the divine arts practitioners of the Eternal Peace Empire who stood in the same realm, compared to Qin Mu, the heavenly devil cult master who had carved his path forward by killing every enemy before him. The woman was vastly inferior. Carefree Sword was a divine weapon, unmatched in sharpness. After shredding the hoops, its momentum did not weaken in the slightest. The blade pierced through the woman's mandible and burst out from the other side of her skull. A thin trail of blood appeared upon the mountain peak. Qin Mu called the Carefree Sword back to his side. Yet, before he could even breathe a sigh of relief, his eyes widened. As rocks continued falling away from the two secondary peaks, they revealed something hidden beneath, the bodies of two enormous brass bells. Those peaks had never been mountains at all. They had only been covered by a layer of stone. Even though Qin Mu had witnessed many massive spirit weapons before, those had all been treasures passed down through the legacies of powerful cults. Although the spirit weapons of West Earth were not as exquisitely refined as those of the Eternal Peace Empire, cult legacy treasures were still extraordinary objects. They were artifacts forged through the lifelong effort and meticulous care of powerful practitioners. That paper talisman on the mountain peak must have been sealing this mountain giant, Qin Mu thought. It must have awakened long ago, and then its owner sealed it here to suppress the family's precious treasure. The corners of Qin Mu's eyes twitched violently as he realized their situation had suddenly become far worse. The mountain giant raised the two enormous brass bells and swung them without hesitation. The bells crashed together, their openings pointed directly toward Qin Mu. The mountain giant had never truly been asleep. It had only been sealed. Its spirit had always remained intact. That was why the Yu family had sealed it here. When they needed it, they simply had to remove the seal and unleash the terrifying giant once more. Bang! The two massive bells collided, and a terrifying sound wave surged forward. Wherever the wave passed, the road rose upward and churned violently, rushing toward the dragon Qilin like a living tide. Yet the greatest threat was not the rising road. It was the sound of the bells. The ringing was born from two cult legacy treasures smashing against one another. The aristocratic family of West Earth is truly fierce. Fatty Dragon, don't move. Even as Qin Mu praised the enemy, his vital chi erupted outward. Countless rune markings spun around his body like a storm before surging forward to surround the dragon Qilin. The devastating sound wave rushed toward them. But before the destructive power could reach the dragon Qilin, the rune markings formed a teleportation formation. The divine art of teleportation activated instantly. Qin Mu and the dragon Qilin vanished. In the next moment, they reappeared 1 mile away. If Qin Mu had teleported alone, he could have crossed 20 or 30 miles in a single step. If he brought another person with him, he could still travel 10 miles. But transporting a gigantic creature like the dragon Qilin limited the distance greatly. 1 mile was already the limit. Yet for the mountain giant, a distance of 1 mile was nothing. With a single stride, it could travel more than 10 miles. Qin Mu turned his head to look behind him. The place where they had previously stood had risen into the air, trembling violently like banners fluttering in a gale. In the next instant, the road shattered into countless fragments beneath the raging sound wave. More than 20 miles of land were completely destroyed. Nothing remained in its path. The mountain giant possesses no magic power, Qin Mu exclaimed, yet simply by smashing those two enormous bells together, it unleashes such terrifying strength. Truly astonishing. Unable to restrain himself, Qin Mu praised the enemy again. Meanwhile, the dragon Qilin began sprinting wildly. Behind them, the colossal mountain giant turned and took its first step forward. Suddenly, Qin Mu saw darkness fall over his head. When he looked up, the mountain giant's gigantic foot was already descending toward them. The dragon Qilin's speed instantly surged to an incredible level. With a few bounding leaps, he surpassed the speed of sound. The fatty's improvement shocked Qin Mu deeply. He had no idea what kind of spirit pills Fatty Dragon had eaten to become so much faster than before. At such a life-threatening moment, the dragon Qilin could not bother thinking about tricking his meal provider into improving his food. All he cared about now was escaping with his life. The speed he unleashed was simply terrifying. Boom! Behind them, the mountain giant's massive foot slammed into the ground, instantly formed beneath its impact. In the next moment, the giant raised its hand and hurled one of the huge brass bells downward. The dragon Qilin sprinted desperately. The enormous bell crashed down behind him. Yet the power of that bell was unbelievably terrifying. When the sound wave entered the ground, it travelled 3 to 5 times faster than it did through the air. Behind the dragon Qilin, the earth exploded violently. The sight was horrifying. The sound wave reached the dragon Qilin and blasted him high into the air. Fire clouds immediately formed beneath the dragon Qilin's hooves, and he resumed sprinting through the sky. Behind him, the mountain giant swung the second brass bell downward while raising the first bell upward so they could collide again. Bang! The bells rang out once more. At the point where the bells struck each other, the ripples of sound compressed space itself into something tangible. When the sound wave travelled along that compressed path, its speed became even faster. Qin Mu's hair stood on end. He quickly flipped backward and pulled out the Moonjade Eye. The artifact shone with brilliant light as a beam shot straight toward the incoming sound wave. Weng! The destructive sound wave was sliced cleanly into 2 halves by the beam of light. 2 terrifying waves of energy brushed past the dragon Qilin from both sides. The violent tremors caused Qin Mu's scalp to crawl, and he shuddered uncontrollably. If that sound wave had struck them directly, Qin Mu and even the dragon Qilin would have been shattered into countless fragments and completely annihilated. West Earth does possess its own profound knowledge, Qin Mu muttered, but this kind of knowledge is not beneficial for cultivation. He looked back again. The mountain giant had been struck by the beam from the Moonjade Eye. Half of its left shoulder had collapsed where it had been sliced apart. Meanwhile, the dragon Qilin continued fleeing farther and farther away. With its current condition, the mountain giant could no longer reach them with its sound waves. At that moment, however, the mountain giant suddenly squatted down. When Qin Mu saw this, his heart trembled violently. In the next instant, the giant began to sprint forward. Its speed was utterly shocking. "My God, that's not right," Qin Mu muttered. "There must be someone controlling this mountain giant, otherwise it would not be so intent on pursuing me and the dragon Qilin like this." Understanding dawned upon him. The woman of the Yu family who had removed the seal had already been killed, so it could not be her. That meant someone else must have been hiding nearby. And their cultivation must be extremely high. Otherwise, how could they manipulate such a gigantic mountain giant? Just as this thought crossed his mind, Asward light suddenly flashed across the sky. A human head fell from the air. Several pieces of a corpse followed after it. The corpse belonged to a silver-haired old woman holding a cane. The cane had also been severed into 2 pieces. Qin Mu was momentarily stunned. He turned to look at the mountain once more. The giant had suddenly frozen in place and ceased its pursuit. It seemed that the white-haired old woman had indeed been secretly controlling the mountain giant to attack them. Otherwise, how could the giant have immediately targeted Qin Mu? The moment it awakened? "Fatty Dragon, stop!" Although the dragon Qilin did not understand why, he obediently came to a halt. Qin Mu opened his cinnabar heaven's eyes and looked toward the mountain giant. Upon its head stood a lone figure. It was Gi Qi. The sword light returned from the clouds and circled twice around him before settling. Gi Qi bowed politely and bid them farewell. "Have a safe journey!" Qin Mu returned the gesture with a bow. "Thank you for your auspicious words." The figure then raised a flag and draped it over himself. In an instant, he vanished from the mountain peak. "Teleportation flag! Patriarch gave him one as well." Qin Mu smiled faintly. "He is just like Patriarch. They both appear indifferent to worldly gains, yet their hearts are truly warm. Gi Qi is undoubtedly Patriarch's son, Fatty Dragon. Patriarch has a worthy successor." Translator, Ninetales, editor, Dark Gem. The dragon Chillin strode upon blazing fire clouds as he rushed toward the southwest. Before them loomed Heavenly Province Sect, its twin mountains rising like an enormous heavenly gate guarding the path of the world. And upon those peaks stood countless palaces, layered one upon another like halls of the immortals. Yue Qingshan had been making his way toward Heavenly Province Sect when a sudden sensation brushed across his awareness. He turned his head, only to see the dragon Qilin racing toward him, with Qinmu seated upon its back. Yue Qingshan nearly leapt out of his skin in shock and halted immediately. His speed is so fast! If I go back to the sect and report him, he might just kill me on the spot. The dragon Qilin came to a stop, and Qinmu cupped his hands in greeting. Yue Qingshan returned the salute. Why isn't Brother Yue attending the Flowery Mountain Festival and instead returning to Heavenly Province Sect? Qinmu asked, wearing a cordial and gentle smile. Yue Qingshan instantly returned the smile. I'm ugly and it's difficult for me to please a beauty, so attending the Flowery Mountain Festival would serve no purpose. Qinmu's smile warmed further. How could Brother Yue be ugly? You possess the appearance of a talented gentleman and would certainly capture the heart of a beauty. It would be best if you returned to attend the Flowery Mountain Festival. Yue Qingshan's hair instantly stood on end. The last time Qinmu had spoken a similar line was when he unleashed the sword of founding Emperor Sea of Blood and slew 4 experts on the spot. Now that he repeated the same phrase again, if Yue Qingshan failed to read the situation and stubbornly insisted on returning to the mountain, what would greet him might very well be a sword strike that would sever his life. Many thanks to Cultmaster Qin for the auspicious words. Yue Qingshan expressed his thanks and immediately turned around to head back toward Fragrant Bloom City. Qinmu watched him depart before urging the dragon Qilin onward once more, deliberately taking a wide detour around Heavenly Province Sect. When Yue Qingshan finally caught sight of Fragrant Bloom City in the distance, he turned his head to glance back, thinking to himself, True Heaven Palace has ordered his capture. If my sect could seize him and strengthen our relationship with True Heaven Palace, my standing within the sect would surely rise greatly. He had just begun to consider turning back when his gaze suddenly fell upon a colossal giant-shaped mountain standing upon the barren plains. The sight left him frozen with astonishment. Then he noticed the shattered roads and the devastation carved across the land by terrifying sound waves. Numerous experts of the Yu family were flying through the sky around the severed limbs of the Yu family's old grandmother, crying out in grief. Yu family's old grandmother is also dead? Yue Qingshan stood there stunned for a moment before continuing straight toward Fragrant Bloom City. If even the Yu family's old grandmother couldn't stop him even with a massive mountain, our Heavenly Province sect would definitely struggle to capture him. It would be better to avoid unnecessary trouble. Why not simply go admire the beauties instead? Bamboo City lies just ahead. 2 days later, Qinmu stood upon the head of the dragon Qilin with the geographical map of West Earth spread open in his hands. Carefully comparing the map with the astronomical signs in the sky, he spoke with delight. Once we reach Bamboo City, we won't be far from True Heaven Palace. Fatty Dragon, you've worked hard these past few days. You've been running especially fast this time. Over the last 2 days, the dragon Qilin had not slacked off at all and had laboured diligently. With the strength in his legs, he could travel 20,000 miles in a single day. At that pace, they would need at most half a day to reach True Heaven Palace. During the journey, they had encountered no small amount of trouble. Because of the arrest order issued by True Heaven Palace, numerous divine arts practitioners had been scouring the land for his trail, and quite a few fierce battles had erupted along the way. However, none had been as terrifying as the Yu family's bell-swinging mountain giant. The battle power of that mountain giant had been truly dreadful, and those capable of possessing such treasures were usually powerful and influential families. The time required to prepare such a weapon was immense. So they would normally have a mountain giant awakened in advance or sealed away beforehand. The dragon Qilin's speed was extraordinarily swift, so unless someone knew his destination beforehand, it was impossible to prepare in advance to intercept him. During the journey, Chinmu had personally experienced the peculiarities of the paths, skills, and divine arts of West Earth. Aside from wielding mountains and rivers as weapons, the divine arts practitioners of West Earth also raised various monsters. They enlightened strange beasts and awakened their spirits. By nurturing them from a young age, they ensured absolute loyalty. Furthermore, those strange beasts also served as their spirit weapons. They were both companions and weapons, and when compared to mountain spirits and earth spirits, they were far more nimble and versatile. The methods of West Earth, where all things possessed spirits and could be awakened, had truly broadened Chinmu's horizons. The dragon Qilin sprinted forward, drawing closer and closer to Bamboo City. The region ahead was mostly mountainous terrain, and from time to time they encountered divine arts practitioners rushing through the sky. Most of them rode upon flying strange beasts. Chinmu raised his brows slightly as he noticed the numerous divine arts practitioners of West Earth observing his movements. "We're being monitored again. It seems we can't enter Bamboo City. There will definitely be traps waiting there. We can only travel through the wilderness." Chinmu's consciousness pulsed as he used the communication method of heavenly feathers to alert the dragon Qilin. Then he inhaled deeply, filling his chest with a long breath. Whoosh! He expelled the breath in one powerful exhale, and in an instant thick fog burst outward in every direction, covering more than 10 miles of the sky. The dragon Qilin immediately plunged into the forest below. The divine arts practitioners rushed into the fog to search for them, yet when the mist finally dispersed, Chinmu and the dragon Qilin had long since vanished. "Young master is here!" One divine arts practitioner suddenly cried out nervously. A luxurious carriage soared through the air, drawn by phoenixes. Within the carriage sat a youth who appeared sturdy, yet not fat, and numerous women accompanied him at his side. What was peculiar was that, although women in West Earth generally held higher social positions, the women of True Heaven Palace behaved with complete obedience before this youth and dared not act freely. Numerous divine arts practitioners bowed in greeting. "Young Master Yu." Young Master Yu surveyed the surroundings before smiling faintly. "He still managed to escape? No wonder. Back when I led everyone to pursue Nai Kui, he also interfered and allowed Nai Kui to escape. That took place in the Great Ruins, not West Earth, so I couldn't act too recklessly. But now that we are in my territory, it would be rather childish if he still believes he can escape from my grasp." The youth was none other than Yu Bochuan, who had previously hunted Xiongxiu and her daughter. He was the son of the palace master of True Heaven Palace. Though young in years, his methods were ruthless and his schemes exceedingly cunning. Xiongxiu had once been the palace master of True Heaven Palace until she was overthrown by the Yu family. Yu Bochuan's cultivation was not considered extraordinary, yet he had been able to lead a large group to pursue her, an existence at the level of cult master, and nearly drive her to death after eliminating her powerful followers one by one. That fact alone demonstrated Yu Bochuan's abilities. His strategies were deep and formidable. Yu Bochuan nodded gently, and one woman of True Heaven Palace flew upward to execute her divine art. Instantly, the white clouds in the sky twisted and transformed into the shape of an arrow pointing downward. The carriage descended into the forest below. Another woman stomped her foot upon the ground, causing numerous rocks to roll together and merge into a massive stone giant. The giant pointed toward the direction Chinmu had fled while declaring, "The person riding the giant beast went that way." The woman then dispersed the divine art, and the stone giant collapsed back into an ordinary heap of rocks. The phoenixes pulled the carriage onward as Yu Bochuan reclined within it with a smile. "In West Earth, no one can escape the tracking of our True Heaven Palace. Nai Kui could not do so before, and this cult master Qin will find it even more impossible. Young master, this time the Grand Master of the Golden Palace personally came to inform us, requesting Elder B of our True Heaven Palace to arrest this cult master Qin." A woman of True Heaven Palace smiled charmingly. Elder B and the Grand Master of the Golden Palace share old ties, so ordering the arrest was expected. That Grand Master is borrowing the power of our True Heaven Palace to eliminate a powerful enemy, which means he will owe us a favor. But why is young master personally assisting him? Yubochuan smiled faintly. I'm not helping the Grandmaster. I'm simply meeting Cult Master Qin. Last time I suffered a loss at his hands and allowed him to snatch away the green dragon bead, a precious treasure. Since he dared to step into West Earth again, I must naturally teach him a lesson. Besides, if he has come to West Earth this time, his intentions cannot be simple. I suspect he is not merely sightseeing. Since he rescued Nai Kui and the little princess earlier, he is probably planning to help her reclaim the throne of princess. If he is here, Nai Kui cannot be far away. His gaze turned cold as frost as he spoke indifferently. Even though my mother has now become the master of True Heaven Palace, if she fails to give birth to a little princess, her position as palace master will not be secure. Nai Kui's return is as nothing unexpected. However, this cult master Qin and Nai Kui will never imagine how formidable my strength truly is. He raised his head to gaze toward the direction Qin Mu had fled and said coldly, "Let me give them a great surprise." The dragon Qilin sprinted through the mountains like a bolt of lightning, crossing ridge after ridge. Though his speed was slower than before, it was still extremely swift. Qin Mu observed the surroundings and frowned slightly. The terrain here was somewhat different from the layout recorded on the West Earth geographical map that GK had given him. The divine arts practitioners of West Earth like to toss mountains around when they fight. I suspect they never bother putting them back afterward. Using the terrain to determine my location isn't reliable. I still need to rely on astronomical observations. He raised his head and formation markings rotated within his eyes. Looking up toward the sky, the stars and constellations hidden behind the daylight slowly revealed themselves. After determining his position, he finally let out a breath of relief and smiled. We've already passed Bamboo City. Just as he spoke those words, a sudden rumbling erupted from ahead. Qin Mu frowned slightly and raised his head to look forward. There he saw dust surging skyward, transforming into a dense fog that blanketed the mountain ranges ahead. He could not see what force was causing such world-shaking movement. The dragon Qilin immediately halted as well, staring ahead nervously. The dust thickened more and more as it rolled forward, swallowing forests and mountains alike. "Cult Master, what is that?" The dragon Qilin cried in astonishment. The ground trembled continuously, and the surrounding trees shook violently. Rocks leapt and bounced upon the ground as though an earthquake were occurring. Yet this was not an earthquake. Qin Mu opened his cinnabar heaven's eyes and gazed into the rolling dust. His eyes widened with disbelief. "There's a city inside that dust." "A city?" The dragon Qilin asked in confusion. "How could a city cause such a huge commotion?" "Because that city is running through the forest." Qin Mu's scalp nearly exploded with shock as he spoke sternly. "That city is charging straight toward us. Fatty dragon, run! Run!" The dust surged forward like a tidal wave and a magnificent city emerged before their eyes. It was charging directly toward them. Beneath the towering city walls that rose dozens of yards high were enormous legs as thick as pillars. Behind those walls, the great houses had transformed into towering giants overflowing with murderous intent. Some beat massive drums while others carried colossal treasures. At the same time, the city gates swung open, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth growing from both the gates and the walls. They snapped open and shut repeatedly, chewing everything that passed before them into fragments, even entire mountain peaks. Anything that could not be chewed apart was dragged into the city, where monstrous giants smashed it into pieces. The entire city continued sprinting straight toward them, and upon its gates were written two enormous characters, Bamboo City. The divine arts practitioners of West Earth had actually awakened an entire city.